Hello, everyone.
Hello.
Welcome to this edition of the Exceptional Advice Show. So, Tristin, what are we talking about today?
So today is another episode in our client engagement series, and today's topic is contextual sequencing.
Okay, cool. So, it's a bit of an interesting concept and maybe an esoteric one to explain as well. So, we'll do our best for you today. So just as a reminder for everyone, so we do a lot of videos on client engagement, but we have a 4-part or a 5-part series on the 4 key elements of client engagement. So if you haven't checked it out already, I suggest that you go back and watch or listen to the episode, which is titled The 4 Key Elements of Client Engagement. That's the summary piece. So you can watch the other 4 where we delve into the 4 key elements in any other order. But I think it would be helpful to have the overview. You don't necessarily have to stop what you're doing right now if you haven't, but I'd probably go and tune into that after this if that's the case. Okay, so what is contextual sequence? Normally I throw to Tristin and say, "Hey Tristin, what is contextual? Do you want to have a crack at it?"
Yeah, sure.
All right.
So the way I understand contextual sequencing is that it's sort of the journey that you take someone on in order to help them understand a certain viewpoint or perspective.
Okay, so yeah, I think it's part of that, and this is why it's a bit of a tricky one to explain because there's a whole lot of elements to it. The definition is pretty nuanced, really. So I think in order to explain contextual sequence, we kind of need to speak about, well, what do we mean by context? Now, again, this is our wording, it's our definitions for a concept that we haven't really heard talked about or explained in this way. So it's our framing. So again, it's why we're going to spend a little bit of time because it could be language definitional issues for you in interpreting, what we're actually getting to here. So, when people say to you, well, what do you do? If I was giving you the best answer, I'd say I'm a contextual engineer. That's what I'm kind of obsessed by. How does context work? How does it affect our behavior, perspective, reality, decision-making? And then how does advice interact for the advisor? So, and this is one of the things that I love and why I'm obsessed with advice and the profession of advice and the purpose and all of that is because the synchronicity is just so crazy, right? So the context of yourself. So in being an advisor, how do you shift your own point of view, perspective? I had some challenging conversations with some clients, different scenario. I've been doing this for nearly 27 years and just this week, had an interesting one and, it kind of threw me a little bit for a minute. But I love the fact that can happen through advice. And every time it does, I'm reflecting and looking at how my context is shaping, where I'm at, my behavior, my view on the world, my reality. So what is context? Well, to me, context it's made up of everything you've experienced, but not just what you've experienced, how you've interacted with what you've experienced. Okay, so and not only that, how does that interact with your particular, personality? So the whole nature versus nurture, I've been obsessed and I kind of, every single client meeting I've ever had, which is a lot, and my best estimates is, over 40,000. Every single one of those to me is learning this kind of interaction of context and how it works and how advice can interact with that. And so what I've observed in the nature versus nurture is that we're all kind of born, there is a core element that is uniquely us. And interestingly, the core element between people isn't very different. The similarities are, we're all driven by roughly the same things. But there's nuances in that, and the nuances add up. When you kind of boil it down to the core center of who someone is, and that's, we'll do a whole series of episodes on helping people understand who they really are. But when you boil it down, the similarities between people are massive, but the differences are so nuanced, and the nuances add up to a huge amount of difference. And then on top of that, then you've got the context, right? Which is, again, what you've experienced in your life, the pain you've gone to, every time you've interacted with, some fear, some discomfort, some, challenging situations, how you've reacted, how that's layered onto your amygdala and your memory recall system, how that's processed and put together in your subconscious mind for recall and behavioral mechanisms. How is that all added up, right? So your context is shaped by the sum total of all of those experiences. It's also shaped by what you've just experienced in your recent history. So, all of that can make up a major component of how you're perceiving and interacting in the world, all of your history. By the same token, what you've taken in the last 24 hours, right, and then what you've taken in the last 5 minutes or 10 minutes is also going to drastically affect what your context for this particular moment is. So in other words, when you move into an experience, so you're moving into a moment, you're moving into this situation, which is the now, like now, like now. Everything that's come before shapes how you perceive and interact with that. So does that kind of make sense what I mean by context? And I'm actually going to use some slides, which we don't normally do in episodes. So if you're tuning into this via podcast, I'm definitely going to do my best to explain them. But for those of you who are watching on YouTube or LinkedIn or something like that, you'll be able to see them. Of course, if you're on podcast, you can always flip back over to the YouTube version as well, if you just wanted to check them out. But I'll do my best at explaining it. But I'm going to use them as some visual tools. So personal context, let's bring that one up. So the sum total of a person's predilections, perceptions, avoidance patterns, and aspirational motivations. So as I kind of gave you the big definition, so I can help you understand how predilections, perceptions, avoidance patterns, aspirations fit into what I was describing. So all of those things I was describing create these things, right? They create your preferences, your predilections. They create your overall perception. They create the things which your subconscious is trying to get you to avoid, right? So, and a lot of the time, the things you avoid are not in your best interest. So, and what your aspirational motivations are. What are the things that actually drive you and appeal to you? So all of this makes up the melting pot of how you're interacting and perceiving information or experience, right? So if you're an advisor, it's really important for you. And that's why I said the nuances in this are just crazy. So I can spend my lifetime obsessing with this and I'll still be, we'll be doing an episode when I'm like 93 and I'll be like, yeah, imagine looking back to when I was like just about to turn 50, right? And how much different and how much I've seen things evolve since then, right? So I just want you to understand why, because my context is going to change as well. But it's really important for you, not just in your engagement with a client, to be looking at what is talked about on the surface, but also to be focused on what the context is, right? And this is a challenging thing. And you could inadvertently miss one step in a process, and that will change the person's perception of your entire engagement. Or alternatively, you can add a few steps into your process that in 90% of the cases is going to make sure that you're avoiding those things happening. Okay? So does that kind of set the scene? You think that's a reasonable explanation?
Yeah, that makes sense.
And I think the important thing here is to say, excuse me, that they are unnamed, right? So the person hasn't said out loud what their context is, right, to themselves. So they don't know. Most of what's driving people around a perceptional interaction with a piece of reality, and all of the behavioral stuff and everything that comes into play isn't known by the individual. They've never actually made it explicit. It's maybe they're aware of it at a loose thought level, but they've never made it structured. They've never made it explicit in their mind. And they certainly haven't articulated it that way. And again, if you want to be an exceptional advisor, then that's one of the key things that you should be focused on doing, is whatever someone's making a decision around. And by the way, this is a topic for a whole other episode or more. Whatever you're making a decision around, you need to be in a position to make sure that the context that you have isn't in conflict with the outcome that will get to you to where you really want to be in an authentic way for your authentic best version of your life. And so the slides from today come from a whole workshop series that's about unlocking the emotional context of your clients. And in that, we kind of delve into these things, and we talk about, if you give advice to someone that is sound, it fits, it makes perfect sense, it's a beautiful outcome, and it gets them to exactly where they want to be, but there is a contextual emotional blockage, right? So in other words, maybe you're helping them restructure a property portfolio, and they have a particular attachment for whatever reason. A common one I see is widowers, right? So, you've got a lady, husband had bought properties. Maybe he took, and I'm not trying to be sexist here, it could be the other way around as well. But usually one of the partners will be taking care of the finances. So let's say he's done that. He's bought these properties, created wealth, he's passed away. Now she's in a position where she doesn't want to sell the property. Why does she not want to sell the property, Tristin?
Well, she's got a connection to it, right?
Well, what's the connection?
Oh, well, I mean, it could depend on the context, right? But I'm cheating a little bit because I've heard this example before,
I know.
right? So, you maybe she was never the one to really look after it. She always kind of just left that up to him to deal with. And then, now he's gone. She doesn't want to, maybe sell it for a loss or sell it for as much as it could have been, because then she's made a mistake and then it's all her fault. And
okay, so paralyzed by indecision. So I don't want to make a mistake. But it could also be holding on to, the past. Well, if I sell it, and he took care of us. He set us up to be. And I'm using a particular example here that we've worked through with a client. By the way, there's been quite a few scenarios with this similar. This is not an uncommon scenario for those of you in the financial advice space. And so she's now in a position of, the conflict is really, if she sells it, what if she makes a mistake? Right. So there's two things. One is her learning to own her own value. Right. So in the past, she'd sublimated her decision making around this to her husband, and he did a really good job of that. And so she's afraid. Well, what if I make a mistake? What if I'm not worthwhile? So you're dealing with a self-worth issue. Right. Secondly, there absolutely could be if I'm selling it, there's kind of sacrilege against his memory, or maybe I'm a bad wife, or maybe I've let go. And often, and in this particular example, it was a case of not letting go, right? So we had three adult daughters as well, ranging from, I think, 25 to 35. So she's paralyzed by making a bad decision for them, but also afraid to let go. If she lets go of the property, then she's a bad person. She's let go of her husband's memory. And in that particular example, we help the advisor realize this context and delve into these things, and actually help, move past that. And just recently we were talking to that advisor, and he was saying that he got a fruit basket from one of the daughters. I don't think I told you that one. So I got a fruit basket from one of the daughters. And, the daughter was just saying, thank you for saving my mum's life, because she just got re-engaged. Right? It's a few years down the track from, this interventional advice process. Now, up until that point, she'd been a client of this financial advisor for, 5 years, since before her husband passed away, I think, actually. I could be wrong on that. But anyway, so been a client for some time. And it was really hard for this financial advisor because, she's in this position where there's millions, and, I think it was like $5 or $6 million worth of property. So not insignificant. And she can't afford to repair the leak in a roof, right? Because she can't get the pension. because obviously she's got too much assets. And so, yeah, she's in a position where she's compromising a living. But not only that, she's not living. She's not, it's 5 years down the track from her husband passing away. And she's just kind of at home and lost because she's not owning her own value, and she's not letting go, and she's holding on to the wrong things. And in this particular case, the property was an expression of that. So for 5 years before this, right, our client, the advisor, had been saying to her, look, it's pretty simple. Just sell one of the properties, right? You can have $1 million and put it into your superannuation, and, you're going to be in a position where you're fine. You don't have to sell all of the other ones. But she'd never done that. And the reason that never happened is, one, because she was in the wrong context, and two, because he hadn't helped her to shift her context. Does that kind of make sense?
Yeah.
So contextual sequence is really about your initial engagement, right? And then it goes into much more nuance in ongoing engagements like, the one we talked about, where you're delving into these things. So contextual sequence is about you, right? And I want you to understand this, because this is the bit that I love about advice. It's a two-way thing. In order for you to help your clients become more self-aware, which is ultimately what you're trying to do as an exceptional advisor, you want them to be in a position to realize their own answers, to be more accountable to themselves, to take the right steps and the right action to actually get what it is that they really want in life, and to not sit still and not become complacent and not be trapped by the fact that everybody needs to feel like they're moving forward and they're accomplishing things. Now, that definition will change for everyone, but that's when we talked about those. If you drill it all the way down, everybody shares that commonality. So when it comes to contextual sequence in your client engagement, are you taking your clients through the right honesty and set of things to help them be in a position to make the right decision about their engagement with you? Does that make sense?
Yeah.
And then it doesn't ever stop at the engagement, because beyond that, it's you, how are you helping your client shift their context to be able to get more of what they actually want out of life, to make better choices, to let go of attachments, like, a husband's passed away and, well, I'm a bad person if I let go of that. How do you help them move beyond those things? Now, for those of you who are sitting here, and I get this all the time, now he's moving into the life coaching. I don't even know what a life coach is, right? So no offense to anyone who's listening who is a life coach, that's great. I just have this definition called advice, right? So I don't care if you're an accountant or lawyer or solicitor or a life coach or business coach or whatever. In my view, if you're thinking about being an exceptional advisor, then at the end of the day, your job is to help people to be more aware of themselves, to be a better version of themselves, and to do the things to get them to actually be that better version, and having more of the things that are actually in alignment with them, okay, in balance. That's really what it's about. And in order to do that, context is the big piece of the puzzle. So I know I've spent a bit of time talking about it, but it is, as I said, it is a reasonably nuanced one. So I decided I'm going to use some slides again to kind of go through some of this stuff with you, just to set the framework of an example to help you understand how it's not just about you walking the clients through the right steps. So think about it as a client engagement is like a staircase, right? So what you want to do is each step of the way, it's a natural one-step process, right? So what you don't want to do is ask them to, climb up to the second story, right, and then come down and walk up the stairs, right? Or you don't want them to climb, 2 normal-sized steps, and then for there to be the next step is 2 meters tall. Hopefully that kind of makes sense to you guys, right? So it's about the right steps at the right time. But it's also about, it's not just about getting the client to say yes to your engagement, okay? So yes, the right steps and the small steps, getting them, articulating value, the right, or you get all of that. I mean, if you're an advisor, you've obviously had to do a lot of this with your clients, and you can figure out if you, bring the wrong things into the equation at the wrong time, then you might not have any clients say yes at all. So if you're listening to this and you've been an advisor, you get that point. But it's not just about the context for your client. It's also about yours. And so, this little saying, intent trumps everything, right? It does. So when you're going into a meeting with your clients, your intent will be based on your context, right? So what did you experience beforehand? Were you running from one meeting straight into another? And then what's your belief patterns, your personal context that I brought up on the screen before? How is that interacting with what you're experiencing? And one of the most important things that you should be doing in going into every meeting is to reset your intent. Okay? And so what we do when we work with advisors is to help them find ways. And I really don't like having structured scripts because everyone's different. Our job is to help, in my view, our job is to help people find their best version, to be their best version of themselves. But what you want to make sure you're doing is to have the right things in the right order, but within whatever frame of reference and personal nuance that you choose to use as an advisor with your client. So there needs to be a combination of free floating. You're in the moment. You need to be in the moment. You need to be trusting your intuition and your relationship and your connection to the client. But you also need enough of a process so that you don't skip things, so that your personal, it's not just you taking your client through the right things in the right order, but you're also doing that for yourself. And if you're not doing it for yourself, then you're probably not doing it for your client. Okay? This will make, as I said, there's a lot of nuance to this. So this will make more sense as we kind of work on progressing through. So I'm just going to bring up these slides. And is that one? Yep. All right. Sorry, guys. That's what happens when you have multiple PowerPoints open at the same time. All right, so just in talking about this, another way to look at it, and again, I'm quoting myself here. So the problem with most of the answers in the world is that they were created by asking the wrong questions. Or another thing that I say all of the time is if you ask the wrong question, what do you always get?
Wrong answer.
If you ask the right question, but in the wrong order, what do you get?
Wrong answer.
Okay. So it's really important to understand this. And if you were kind of really drilling into it, what's the key part of an advisor's role? To figure out which questions to ask, right? And in what order. And that's, again, a big part about what contextual sequence is about. But it's not just about asking your client the question, it's about asking yourself. Because this is a relationship. Every engagement is a relationship and it starts with you first. So if we go back to price tension, what's the number one input to that? How you perceive your value and price, right? That's going to determine more than any other thing how clients interact with your price, right? Absolutely, 100%. So if you think you're expensive, what are clients going to think? You're expensive, right? It's just that straightforward. So you've got to change your input first, and then you get this dynamic effect that happens between the two of you, and it has to be the advisor that's always lifting themselves up first. And in order to do that, you need to be asking yourself the right questions, okay? So let's skip ahead, and we're gonna use the advisor questions first, right? So, a lot of people will know us in the past for being, the social media and professional services guys, right? And so the social advisor. So yeah, we have done a hell of a lot of stuff around how does brand work, how does it interact with referrals, how does social media work, what's the best way to build a brand, how does human resonance work with this context piece, and then all the way down to the technicals of how personal SEO works and what's the right structure of a video and how long should it be, and all of those things that, Tristin and I as nerds like to kind of mechanically work out and understand. So a lot of the time we'd have people come to us when they want help with their advice business, right? And by the way, any business, but we don't just work with advisors, but any business, but advisors definitely. So what's the common question as to how do you take your business to the next level, right? This is where most people in business are at, especially when they're looking to talk to us because they're looking for an advisor. Why do they look for an advisor? Because they want to have more of what they actually want out of life. And in this case, from a business framing, that's part of the mix. So the question will generally be, when you're thinking about taking your business further, getting the real value out of it, what do I do and who do I get to pay me the best for it? Does it kind of make sense?
Yep.
So you're building a business plan. What questions do you ask first? Well, this is how conventional wisdom processes it. Okay. So once you've asked that question, what's the next question that has to come as a consequence, right? Because you've asked one question one way, you get an answer that leads you to what the next question is. So this is the sequence. So if you start with the wrong question, then it's not just you get the wrong answer, you get the wrong answer, then you get the wrong question, then you get the wrong answer, then you get the wrong question. So it follows that order. So once you're asking, what do I do and who do I get to pay me the best for it? Then the next question is, how do I communicate what I do for them and why it's good for them? Okay, so it could be, a medico or, let's say it's your niche, whatever, right? So you're working with medicos. They're the ones that I can get to pay me the best for what I do. I've got experience. I understand their unique, whatever, their medical structures and trusts and whatever. So now how do I tell them what I do is good for them, right? So, we've got 23 years experience in specializing in medicos, and we've got 12 people who have got 400 degrees, but whatever, right? I'm kind of being a little facetious as I'm saying it, but that's the kind of thinking. How do we tell them what we do is good for them? We understand how doctors work. We can save them money in their structures and trusts and, help them grow their business, change their margins, whatever. So after that question, it's then, well, what's my value proposition and point of difference? So you're kind of leading into that next thing. Well, we only specialize in medicos, right? We know them back to front. We have a 12-step process that has been proven in 432 cases, whatever, right? Again, I'm being a little facetious. But the next thing is, what's my value proposition and what's my point of difference? Kind of makes sense? See how the order flows? And then what comes next? Well, what's my strategy to reach these people? So often when we'd have a business come to us and say, hey, look, this is what we do, and these are the clients that we like to work with. This is why what we do is good for them, right? We've got a history of it. We're good. We create great outcomes. This is why we're different. This is how we do things differently. We manage business risk, cash flow, tax, whatever, investments. We've got a unique process, and that works with medicos, and we know it back to right. And then what they're coming to is, well, okay, so we've got all of that. We're already doing great. We've got, the business is going well. So what's the next question then? Well, what's my strategy to reach these people? And so that's what we've had a lot of people come to us over the years and say, hey, we've got all of that down. We just want to know how to get more of them. Make sense? Mm-hmm. So for those of you listening, and hopefully that kind of tracks with the normal process for how business people go about thinking about what they're doing. And the problem with it is it's asking all of the wrong questions. So when you ask these questions, you have compromised yourself in the process. You have actually removed why you're in business in the first place from the equation. Does anyone, well, I suppose there are some people who do, but this usually doesn't work. But if you're listening to this, if you're listening to this, watching this, and the focus is on exceptional advice, then I'm willing to bet that you didn't go into business just to make as much money as possible, just to get as much money off of other people as possible. I've not yet met a real advisor that were the case, because, by the way, they're mutually exclusive. How could you be an exceptional advisor if that was your intent? If that was your intent, then you couldn't be in the position of asking the right questions and creating the right change for a client. Okay? So what did you go into business for? Why are you an advisor? And if you ask the questions we talked about before, what do I do and who do I get to pay me the best for it? You're completely sublimating that. So what's going to happen if you build a business strategy on this? It's disconnected from you. And are your relationships going to be more disconnected from you? Yeah. are you going to attract more of clients that are not exactly in resonance with the best version of you? Will you be able to create the maximum value if you're working with those people? Not only that, it's not just if you're working with those people. Will you be able to create the maximum... No, I don't think we want that one. Will you be able to create the maximum value, even if you're working with the right person, if you're coming to it from the wrong intent? You can't. So asking the wrong question gives you the wrong context. And the wrong context changes your intent, and that interacts with your decision-making process. So when you're thinking about growing your business or owning your value, and if you're listening into this, then that's really has to be part of the objective. Be the best version of yourself, own your value, create the most outcome for other people. That's why we went into the advice business in the first place. You might define it a slightly different way, but all good advisors have some take on that theme in my experience, and I think I'm qualified to say because I've had that conversation many, many, many times. So then how does this translate? What's a better way to go about asking the question and therefore changing the context? Okay, so I'm going to jump in and use our slides again. Thanks, Tristin. Okay, so I've already covered this by starting the what we do and who can pay me for it. You automatically bias not just your answers, but what questions you will be asking next. So a better way to do is to flip this. So if anyone's coming to me and talking about going forward, this is what I really need to understand. And by the way, it's what they need to understand, and it's how they should approach all of their client engagements, and it's how they should actually communicate their client engagements. So who are we, right? We've got it here as who we are, because you can consider it from an individual or business point of view. I'm just going to switch to individual because I'm speaking to you individually at the moment. So who am I? Who are you? Right? That's the question you really need to be asking first, and it's also what you should be communicating first to your clients if you are doing things in the right contextual sequence. Not just for the client, but for you, because it's going to change the intent of the engagement. Okay? So, who are you? What is your purpose? What are you actually trying to accomplish? What difference do you want to make in the world? So, everybody is actually only rewarded, and this has been my experience in, those more than 40,000 odd meetings over the last, 26, coming up 27 years. It's been universal, right? We're all driven by creating value for other people, okay? Now, don't get me wrong. Some people might be internally conflicted. Their context may be in complete conflict to who they really are, in which case they're going to act like this isn't the case. But it's only an act, and it's only because of their internal conflict with context, okay? So purpose. The purpose has to be how you are looking to make a difference for others. What is the difference you're trying to make? And then the next question is, what's our message? And in fact, in order to get to purpose, right? Purpose is definitely the central piece here, but purpose and message fit together, right? And in order to understand your purpose, in my experience, the best way to do it is find out your message. So what's your message to yourself? So for all of us, we're all developing ourselves on this journey of life. We're all becoming more aware. We're all figuring out how to ask ourselves better questions, right? The right questions in the right order to be more of who we are, to be a better version of ourselves. To me, that's the definition and the journey of life. It's certainly been in my experience. Throughout that, we all have something that's been a sticking point for ourselves. Okay, so I'm just giving a little tip here, and I've seen so many different variations on how to get to purpose, and I think they all miss the point to a large degree in my experience. So one of the ways that I would suggest this, and look, it's a little tip. We actually have a process and a whole bunch of workshops and exercises to go through to nail this, but this is one of the starting points. If you could go back in time and if you could go back in time and just whisper in your own ear, 2 to 4 words. So one bit of advice, what would that be? Okay. What would that be? So depending on what that is, it's going to give you a reasonable idea of what your purpose in life is going to be. So for me, if I could go back in time and whisper in my ear, and if I'm removing all of the emotional conflict in getting to that answer, and which is why, for a lot of you, try that. Absolutely, the exercise will help everyone get more clarity, but it might not get you to the end result, right? It certainly didn't get me there in the first time. But I can say to you that my answer is just be yourself, okay? So my message to myself is, look, just be yourself. Where you've got in trouble is where your ego's trying to prove something. You're trying to be something you're not. You're compensating for your self-worth in different ways. That's always been the bit that's got me in trouble. Now, I've not perfected that. I'm still working on it, right? And that's the journey of life. So that's my particular flavor, my particular nuance in my life journey. And everyone has one. Every single person I've done this one, hundreds and hundreds of people. When you boil it down, there's a particular flavor, a particular nuance, a particular message. And that's the same message I have for you. Why am I doing this? Why am I sitting here with Tristin, right, doing episodes of the Exceptional Advice Show? Why am I going through all of this? Why am I obsessed with the mechanics of advice and contextual engineering and, all of that stuff? Why? Because it's how I can just be myself. But it's also how I can fulfill my purpose, which is to help other people just be themselves. So what am I trying to do with you guys here? I'm trying to help you to just be the best version of yourselves, right? To unwind your context, which is framing you to come at your client engagements from a, what do I do? How do I get to pay them, pay me the most for it? How do I convince them? It's the wrong framing. It's not allowing you to own your value, to be the best version of yourself. So my message is be yourself. And my purpose is to help people be themselves. Okay? Now, only after that, so if we go back to the slides, so only after that should we be looking at, well, who do we choose to serve and what's their frame of reference? Like, do we like working with women who are divorced? So that's the emotional context. I just helping set the scene. Do we like working with people who are coming up to retirement and so they're about to engage in a new stage in their life? For an accountant, do we like working with, people who have been in business for a long time and lost their mojo but really want to get back into it again? I mean, that's kind of one area that I really love. I love working with business owners that have already achieved a degree of success, but something's disconnected and they know that if they just get the right input, they can shoot ahead to the next level. I love that. Right? So as an example, is it, entrepreneurs, people who are just starting out? And yeah, I like some of that as well. And Tristin has a couple of really cool clients that are early in their advice career that I work in with as well. I mean, that's great to see. So you get the idea. Now, when you're coming to your engagement from this point of view and you're coming to your business plan from this point of view, now you're starting to own your value. Your intent's completely different. No longer are you trying to say, well, how do I get money? Now you're saying, how do I be the best version of myself? How does this business become the best expression of myself? Does that make sense? Yeah, so that's an example of if you ask the wrong question, you get the wrong answer. And by doing things in the right order and asking the right questions and taking people on the journey, you actually give them the right contextual sequence to be able to make the best decisions, to take the best action, to get what it is that they actually want from life. Okay? So I always encourage people to go into their engagements by, you can kind of turn off the slides now, I think. I always encourage people to go into their engagements by being direct, right? This is who I am. This is why, this is my reason. This is why I do what I do. This is the value I seek to bring to the table. And here is what I need in order to be willing to do that for someone. So here's my set of expectations. Now that's a very generic one, right? And yes, it's not specifically nuanced to the client. And obviously, as you're going through your engagement, you want all of these things to now be very specific to that client. So what my value is for them, what it is about my connection and relationship with them that's going to reward me. So that has to happen as part of the process as well. But part of the reason why I encourage people to go in with that as an opening in their relationship with a client is because it's transparent. Okay, so it's actually saying to the client, well, look, before you can even judge whether you should be my client or not, it's important that you understand what's driving me. This is who I am. This is what I'm seeking to bring to the table. And this is why I'm doing this. And this is the value my clients get out of it. And this is what I ask for them in order to be willing to do it. So it's not a sales pitch. It's an unsales pitch. It's the opposite. It's you being clear, really clear about your terms. And the reason that it's important is because it makes all the difference in the world when you've put those things on the table up front and they're now explicit. Okay? Can you do it at the second meeting? Can you do it in the third meeting? Yeah, absolutely. But one of the reasons I suggest you do it at the start is because it changes your intent, right? If you're coming into a meeting and you say, hey, before we go anywhere, this is who I am, how are you going to act from that point going forward? Are you going to be more in the moment of making an outcome for them, less worried about whether they're saying yes or no or whatever, more in the frame of reference of owning your value? Absolutely you will. So the context you hold when you go into a meeting is equally as important as the contextual journey you're taking your clients through in order to make their decisions. Okay? Does that kind of make sense?
Yeah, it does.
So as I said, there's a lot to this one, and it's very nuanced. And you know, we kind of have a scorecard. So when we start working with an advice business, we take advisors through, you know, and we give them a score through all 4 of these client engagement categories that we're speaking to you about in this series. And I would say that out of, you know, price pressure and relationship status and engagement language, out of all of these, contextual sequence is the area where consistently advisors are the weakest. So they're coming at things too linearly. They're not looking below the waterline of the iceberg to see what the real issues are with their clients. And most importantly, they're not being honest and transparent enough with their clients. Okay? They're not saying to them directly, this is who I am. This is the value I bring to the table. I know that. It's not for everyone. It's okay if it's not for you. But this is what it means for the people that I love working with. And in order for me to deliver that value, this is what I need from someone in order to be able to do that for them, or just even to be willing. Doing that's so honest and it's transparent. It actually makes it easier for most clients. Some people will struggle with this because you're so transparent with your reason and purpose. It could be challenging for them. And potentially a lot of the time it's because maybe they haven't been clear with their own. But it will make all of your engagements better if they're successful. Okay? And if someone decides not to engage with that up front, then you're generally losing the client that wouldn't be the best engagement for you anyway. So that's why I suggest you do this in that order and in this process. And of course there's a whole mix and match, and for different people it fits. As I said, I don't like having a one size fits all. You've got to find your best pathway. But if you're engaging with a client and you haven't been explicit about all of those things, then you'll make it a major gap in the relationship, in the understanding, and in your intent going into that, which means the client's intent will also not be aligned with yours. Okay. Anything you think we should add for contextual sequence? Is there anything I've missed? I know I'm monologuing on this one a lot because it is nuanced and it is kind of really the deeper part of my, you know, a lot of the intellectual property I've been working to develop over the years.
Yeah, not particularly. I think topic-wise we covered everything. Maybe just practically, like for as a bit of an example, right? So setting expectations up front, right, and being in the right frame of mind for a first meeting, whatever, talking to clients. I think it's important not to be scared to kind of pull people aside for this bit and make a bigger deal out of it. So, I mean, as an example, right, you're running 5 minutes late. Your clients are like, oh, hey, don't worry about it. We're just, you know, chilling out in the reception area, right, wherever. And you walk in, and as you're walking in, you're kind of making small talk, talking about the kids or whatever happens to come up. And that kind of throws you off once you're in the meeting because you've got this structured plan and you're already in there having skipped a few steps ahead, just talking about what's going on, and you've kind of missed setting everything up front because you've just kind of kept it rolling, and it's natural, right? But I think it's very important to say, you know, look, happy to keep talking about this. You know, I'm very interested to find out more. It'll help us out down the track, but I really want to make sure that we understand this together between us. You know, this is what I'm expecting. This is what you can expect. This is how it's going to work. Just check it. Like, you know, is that cool? Are we on the same page? Awesome. Let's keep going.
Yeah, the really, really good point. And so when I talk through this concept with advisors, some people struggle with this because it's like, well, that's just awkward. It seems weird. Why would I kind of give this structured thing at the beginning before I've even got to know them? I want to personalize it. Now, unreservedly, you have to do the same. You have to personalize this all as you progress.
Absolutely.
In my view, there is far more upside to pulling people aside and doing this. And I think Tristin just said an example of how you make it not awkward. You make it not awkward by giving the context. Hey, before we go anywhere, I want you to be in a position to understand who I am. So I know you've got issues that you've come in to talk through, and there's stuff that you want to get onto. But before we go anywhere, I think it's really important for you to get, you know, why I'm here and who I am. I think it'll empower you to be in a better position, you know, to make a choice. And for me, I like to spend some time on that and be clear on it so I can move on to really focusing on what it is that you want to get out of life and how I can help you to get there. So is it okay if, you know, we take a second, and I know it's a little structured, but is it okay if we take a second at the start to go through this and I can explain that to you? If you do it that way, no one's going to be offended, right? It's not difficult to do. Now, will there be clients sitting in there going, what's this got to do with me? You know, I don't get it. They're like, sure. But if you don't do it, then you haven't set your intent and you haven't got an agreed to intent with a client. And later on down the track, you can't come back to this as the frame of reference for everything that you're doing. So certainly in my experience, and, you know, I've got great advisors who don't do it in this order and they've got amazing outcomes, and that's fine. But my personal view is, yeah, I think make a bigger deal out of it. I certainly do. So if any of you were reaching out to say, hey, you know, hey, Baz and Tristin, you know, I'd love to have a chat to you about, you know, where I'm at and what I'm doing with my clients. Well, the first thing I'm going to do is say to you in one version or another, hey guys, just, it's awesome to meet you. Before we get started, I want you to understand who I am. Now, if you've been listening or watching to this, then you already learn a little bit about that. Why am I driven? Why am I so obsessed with advice? Because it helps me be a better version of myself, and because it allows me to be more of myself, and it allows me to fulfill my purpose, which is helping people be themselves. And why do I like working with advisors? Because it gets paid forward. Right? If I help you own your value and you pass that on to your clients, you're helping your clients own their own value, be better versions of themselves. And I know that just makes me feel freaking awesome. So that's what I'm motivated by. And if we're going to talk, I'm going to say that even if you've listened to this, I'm going to say it to you explicitly, because I want to be clear, not just with you, I want to be clear with myself. Right? So yeah, I think that's important. And by the way, do I take 30 seconds to do it, Tristin?
No.
So how long would I usually do that for?
Oh, that's a good question. I don't know. 15, 20 minutes?
Depends on the point in the engagement. Like if it's the first chat, then it might be like 5 minutes, 7 minutes. But 5 and 7 minutes is a reasonable period of time, right?
Oh yeah.
It's certainly
sure.
not 30 seconds.
No.
When it gets to the point where a client's actually deciding to hand over some dollars and we're really going to do things together, then I do it again, but in a much, obviously I'm not repeating the same versions, but then I do it again to really make sure that we've got it right. This is what I'm going to look to get out of it. This is what I'm seeking to give to you individually. This is what I hope to accomplish. This is the bit that'll make me feel good. It's what I'm excited about. And I think this is what you're going to get out of it from what you've said to me. So I'm going to do that again, but like be even way more explicit. So it might be 15 minutes there at that point. Yeah. Okay. So hopefully that set the scene for you. Going through that at the start of the meeting is not the entirety of emotional context. And when we're kind of measuring advisors against this benchmark, that's certainly not the only thing we're looking at. There's a whole bunch of things. For example, it's important in your engagement, I believe, and we're nerds, we measure this stuff. It's important for framing the intent and also the psychology for somewhere in there for you to say to a client, I'd love to help you, but it's okay if it's not for you, right? Now, it doesn't have to be these specific words, but the psychology needs to be passed on. You need to give the client permission to not make a choice to be with you and to acknowledge it. And by acknowledging it, you're actually making the relationship much more balanced. And by the way, you also seem more valuable because you are. What other things kind of fall into that? Asking questions. So once you've gone through this is who I am and this is what I'm looking for, saying to someone, is that what you would like from the relationship? Is that the kind of thing you would like? And actually asking the question and waiting for an answer. So, we use that kind of phraseology a lot through client engagement, is being really explicit about your terms, right, at all stages. And then not just saying to the client, so we're going to do it this way. Is that okay with you? Do you agree to this? So that kind of language. And I think this is a good segue for leading into the next episode, which will be about engagement language. So contextual sequence, really in a summary, is about understanding the nuance of a person, taking yourself and the person on the journey through your engagement for both of you to be in the right position to make the right decisions and to take the best action. For you to be an exceptional advisor, to be the best version of yourself. For the client to get more of what it actually is that they really want from life, and to make the choice about having someone to help them go on the journey to do that. Okay, I think that was a pretty good summary.
Yeah.
As I said, there's a lot of nuance to it. So as always, guys, hope you've taken a lot out of our chat today. If you've got any questions, you can do this simple thing, which is connect to me on LinkedIn and shoot me a message if you want to talk about it. I would also encourage you to, post a comment on our YouTube channel, and to make sure you're subscribed there. If you're not listening to this or whatever on that platform, then please go ahead and do so as well. We like to put the effort into doing the video along with the podcast, so it gives you a choice, especially for things like today where I did use visual aids and some slides. So if you're a podcast person, go onto YouTube and subscribe and give us a comment as well, just because that helps us, right? It helps us in doing this for you. As I've said many times, we're not doing this to attract new clients. We're not doing this to convince you of anything. We're not doing this for sponsorship. We're doing it because I want to be a better advisor, and I want to share what I've learned, and I want to help Tristin, talk about these things. And by doing this together, Tristin and I, and with you, we are all on the journey to being exceptional advisors. And all I ask for, if you've got value and a simple payment, is just to interact with me, right? So let me know. Share the content, let other people know about it. We do think it's much more high level than any of the material we've seen out there as far as client engagement stuff goes, a lot more nuanced. Look, there are people out there that do it really well. We're not claiming to be the best in the world, but I'm not really hearing it talked about. And I missed that, and I would have loved that when I was starting out. I would have loved that now. I would love to hear other people. So love to hear your views as well. Please make sure you jump in and comment as well. And I want to share how you interact with what we've talked about today. Thanks, everyone, and look forward to seeing you in the next episode. Cheers.